This table took me 8 months to make because, as a broke adult, spending 2k on a side table is not an option. And I had too much free time. So the first step was to DIY the mold. It looked good, but actually effed up. So the mold had gaps and I tried to seal them with tape because later on once I have to pour some liquid in and it could leak. And that's why I decided to cover the floor with plastic bags. Moving on to the next step. So this is actually one of the most fun parts of this project, which is to arrange flowers. The only issue is that I kept changing my flower design every few seconds. So now you might be wondering, where did I get those beautiful flowers from? So I destroyed my parents' garden, basically, to get those 3 beautiful flowers. But the thing is, if you get fresh flowers for the table, you need to process them first, which is to put them in silica gel to dry them. The process can take 1 to 4 weeks depending on the type of flower. And well, this is the final result. I know it was very dramatic, but that took me very long. Because I kept changing my design every few seconds. Now it was time to start the pouring process, so I checked the positioning of the mold first. Then cleaned it, and then I could finally start pouring. So the thing I poured in there is called resin. It's still liquid, but after a few days it's gonna harden and become like glass basically. And now I'm using a heat gun to pop the air bubbles that develop by pouring the resin. Place the flowers on top of the first layer of resin. Pick out dirt with a toothpick, and then you just let the flowers in the resin. It hardens and it sticks to the top. So you can get resin anywhere online. So when you buy it, you get 2 liquids, and then you mix them together in the correct ratio, and then you get resin. At this point, I've already spent 7 months on this project, and I was about to go crazy. But I tried to pull through because I've already invested too much time and cash in it. And honestly, I've already started too many projects and dropped them, so this should not become one of them. In total, I poured 5 layers of resin, each being 1 centimeter thick. After pouring, popping air bubbles with a heat gun, removing the dust, and other stuff. I don't know what that is. And then pressing down the flowers so they are covered in the resin. And finally covering the resin so that no more dirt gets in there, and then just wait for a few days for it to harden. And now I'm dancing like crazy, basically because at this point I've already spent more than 7 months on this project. And when I made the preparations for the last pour, I realized how stupid I was. I could have mixed everything in 1 large bucket instead of 15 small cups. But yeah, this bucket has some history. Nope, I'm not dancing because I have a feet fetish. Yes, my ex used to soak his feet in there, in that bucket. And back to the project, I was about to pour the last layer of resin, and I had an issue because flowers were still sticking out of the resin and I didn't have much resin left, and I was not about to buy a new one because it's freaking costly. And then I got distracted. So we've been raising this purple 4 in total, and we've already sold them. Good cash, good money. But obviously it's because we couldn't give them, so. And I'm not sure about the weird noise I just made, but back to the table. Same process as usual. After the pour, popping the air bubbles with the heat gun, then removing dust particles with a toothpick, and then pressing down the flowers aggressively, and then placing the lid on the mold to avoid dust from falling in there. And this is just to show you how weird it is to see someone dancing without music. Yes, I'm weird and I make questionable life decisions. And I just managed to stumble across my own words again. Back to the project. Finally, after 8 months, I was able to finish my table countertop, and it was time to remove that slab of resin out of the mold. And it's also a perfect chance for you to see how I assembled this mold here. Actually, you just see the reverse process because I forgot to record how I assemble it. Well, and it turned out that the tape actually did harm to stop the resin from leaking out of the mold, like you can see here, as it has gotten quite hot from the resin. And I needed to use a knife to remove it, basically. After removing the tape, I was finally able to start the real disassembly process. So by hammering out the pieces of the mold, the description I know is very questionable, but I think you get the point. Towards the end, I struggled with the disassembly because the screw got stuck in the mold and I couldn't get the screw out. But before I could have an anger outbreak, my brother came. And he brought me food. Yes, he likes to walk around in boxer shorts. The dish looked fancy, and yes, this room was full of chemical fumes that could give me cancer, and I should not be eating in here. Well, here's a picture of the resin I finished disassembling. A picture because I forgot to record after I finished it. So as you can see here, I still had to remove the bottom part of the mold that was sticking to the slab of resin. And this was not an easy task because I first needed to scratch off the resin that was sticking to the mold because it leaked through the gaps of the mold. And then I could hammer it out afterwards. So what I did was I hammered on each side of the bottom of the mold to loosen up it from the slab of resin, and then I realized it wasn't working. So I had to change strategies. So I decided to place that slab of resin on the floor on my dirty clothes as a cushion, and then with force I was able to remove the mold. At this point you might be wondering, done yet? But I wasn't done. I still needed to sand the edges of the table countertop of that resin because they were quite sharp. And then I was done. But I still had to make the legs for my table. So I went to Obi to get some wood, the cheapest I could find. And then I just needed to screw, drill, and then cut. And repeat that same process basically for each table leg. Yeah. So I'm just an amateur when it comes to woodwork. I'm just very blessed that my dad had a workshop with all those tools, so that is what made making this table frame easy. And you need to consider that you're just seeing it on a video, and in real life it doesn't look so great. And because I needed my parents' support, they started questioning how much money I spent on this project so far. Oh. Okay, so that right now is a big fat lie. But I still spent less money than if I had bought it, so I guess it's okay. Now, you might be wondering what these things are. First off, do not use a drilling machine without tying your hair, or you might end up like the corn lady. But, so I decided to attach wheels to my table frame, because without them, moving this table would be nearly too impossible. And then I decided to cover the wheels with tape because I had to paint the wood frame and I didn't want my wheels to get dirty. It only took about a day for the wood frame to dry, and on the following day, out of a gypsum board, I cut out a cover for my resin slab and stuck some contact paper on it. Well, and here, this is the final result. I hope you can now make your own resin paper, and thanks for watching!